Hello everyone, this is Wonki Lee. I'm the classical saxophonist and assistant professor of saxophone at Montana State University. Today, I want to share with you my soprano saxophone and also 5 pro tips how to master soprano saxophone. Oftentimes, people ask questions, soprano saxophone is really hard because it's very hard to play in tune. And it is true. This is one of the most challenging instruments among saxophone family. When reed and mouthpiece are small, everything is going to be magnified. So you need to actually have a better control of how to play saxophone. But I have a very practical tips to improve your soprano saxophone playing. And so hopefully this video will be very helpful for you. Now, tip number 1. You have to find right equipments for yourself. In terms of saxophone body or brand, I recommend top 3 brand, Yamaha, Selmer, and Yanagisawa. And they tend to make the best soprano saxophones. I personally like to use Yamaha since I'm a Yamaha artist, and my particular soprano saxophone is Yamaha Custom A75EX gold plated without IG key. So this is regular EX with gold plate. And compared to Selmer or Yanagisawa, it feels bigger and it feels warmer. Now, the downside of Yamaha is that sometimes it's hard to pronounce the note quickly. Compared to Yamaha, Selmer soprano saxophone tends to be more quicker in response. And the tone quality could be a little brighter, or let's say smaller. And many people like that, of course. If I compare different brands of soprano saxophones to different woodwind instrument, I feel like personally Yamaha is closer to oboe, and then Selmer is closer to flute or clarinet. Selmer has much more straight tone quality to it, whereas Yamaha has more resistant. And that's just a preference, and both instruments are very great and both brands are very trusted. Now, Yanagisawa has been very popular among some enthusiasts, and personally they're great saxophones, and to me they feel very neutral. It almost feels like everything is in the center, and of course many people like that. For me, it lacks character, but I enjoy playing Yanagisawa time to time. So this is all preference. All these top 3 brands will not disappoint you, and find the one that speaks to your inner voice as well. Now, more important than the body of saxophone is the mouthpiece, reed, and ligature. And this is where it defines your tone quality and how it plays overall. So for me, I'm using Selmer S90-180, which is exactly the same mouthpiece that I use for alto saxophone. And for the reed, I'm using Van Doren Blue Box Traditional 3, which is softer than my alto, which is 3.0 plus from the Dario. And many people are surprised that I'm using a softer reed for my soprano playing, but even 3 reed feels a little stiffer for my taste. So I actually need to shape it down with my Reed Geek to find exact right amount of resistance. Perhaps maybe it's time for me to go down to 2.5. So I'm kind of experimenting right now. In terms of ligature, I found my voice, and this was a big surprise for me actually to find out. Charles Bay gold-plated soprano saxophone ligature. These combination worked really well for my playing. So I've been using this setup for about probably 5 to 6 years, and I'm very happy with it so far. Now I know many of my colleagues use professionally the Salmer concept mouthpiece with number 4 strength reed, and that works for many people as well. It's very easy to control and has a good projection to it. Now it comes to the preference of tone quality. Personally, I like warmer tone quality because soprano tends to be very, very sort of a bright and noisy up in upper register. So I try to find my voice in a much more warmer, let's say more oval-like woodwind quality, but I still want to have a bright projection as well. So to have a good balance of brightness and warmth, I found that this setup of Selmer S90 180 with Van Doren 3 reed works really well for me. So spend time and really try many different mouthpieces and reed combinations and find your own voice. And one thing that could help for you is to find a player that you love and try to find out what kind of equipment they're using and start from there and see what happens. In terms of neck selection, there is a debate, of course, which one is better, straight neck or carved neck. It really doesn't matter, it's up to your preference. Personally, I liked the tonal quality of carved neck, but also the downside of carved neck, it's more resistance. So it's a little harder to play compared to the straight neck. Straight neck gives you much quicker response, and also the tonal projection is much brighter and feels bigger. Now, the downside of a straight neck is obviously the posture. It's more stress heavy for your right hand thumb when you're holding the instrument, whereas carved neck with a neck strap is actually much easier to control and hold the saxophone. Personally, I've been using the carved neck for my entire career, and I don't think I'm going to change into the straight neck at this point because I found my voice in the carved neck soprano. So, but I want to experiment. It's all about your preference and what kind of a tone quality that you're looking for. But in terms of body, personally, the carved neck is much easier and feels more comfortable. Now, tip number 2, be able to play overtone and pitch bending before start playing the soprano saxophone. Now, this is where it gets really tricky because soprano saxophone is much harder to play in tune. Basically, everything from octave D, middle D, above tends to be very sharp. So you need to learn how to bring the pitch down. Now, I've seen some teachings where you're supposed to change embouchure to adjust the pitch. This may work in another style of music, but in a classical setting, classical style of music, I do not recommend adjusting your pitch always with the embouchure because it destabilizes your tone quality and you're going to lose a sense of phrasing and sustainability as well. So we need to learn how to bring the pitch down with oral cavity, with overtone. This is why I recommend students start learning alto saxophone first and be able to master overtone and pitch bending and then apply that skill to the soprano saxophone. Now, assuming that you already have that skill sets, this is how I want you to practice the pitch bending. Starting from highest note of F sharp and all the way down to octave G, I want you to be able to pitch bend about perfect force interval, okay, without changing your embouchure or fingering. So this is how it goes. this is really a challenging thing to do, but what it does is it's creating the bigger space, tonal space and the tuning space for each note of upper register of soprano saxophone. So technically you should be able to play any note, okay, without changing embouchure by bending the pitch. And I want to get used to doing that and be able to articulate with the tuner in the center of the tuning, okay, without changing the embouchure. That's the whole point. And this takes a lot of time to practice, but this is the best way to get better at soprano saxophone. And also work on the overtone on soprano, which is more sensitive compared to the alto. Now, how am I doing this? Right, and this is another video that I made how to do an overtone and artissimo, and you could watch that right here. But to recap, in order to achieve overtone and pitch bending, we need to increase air pressure level in our oral cavity. So in order to do so, in order to pressurize the air, we need to have air going from bigger space to the smaller space. Now, bigger space is our lung and also the larynx, this area. The smaller space is your oral cavity. So the first step is to really close the space inside of your oral cavity by raising your tongue and creating hissing sound. Hissing sound is a fricative sound that's proof that you're closing the space as much as you can. And then I want to practice opening up the larynx. Larynx is supposed to be the Adam's apple. And imagine you're placing the Adam's apple a little bit lower while you're doing the hissing sound. And you should create this fricative sound. Okay, by doing so, air pressure will be doubled, but because air is pressurized and becomes heavier, because air is a gas, of course you could compress it as much as you want. The heavier air becomes slower in speed. Now, when the slower and high pressurized air go through the mouthpiece, because of the difference in the pressure level between mouth and the mouthpiece, it creates the amazing effect of overtone. Why? Because now reed is coming closer to the tip of the mouthpiece, but also vibrating slightly slower, suppressing the lower frequency, usually the fundamentals, right? If you take the fundamentals, naturally the overtone pops up. So that's the logic. Now, in terms of pitch bending, we can't really pitch bend upward. That's kind of a proof why this observation is scientifically correct. We could only bend the pitch down. If we do the high pressure air and slower airflow, the reed vibrates slower. Slower vibration is lower pitch. So that's how we get the pitch bending. If you want to know more about in detail about how to achieve pitch bending and overtone, check out this video right here. Tip number 3. Once you can do the pitch bending, next step is to actually have a flexible embouchure. Now, I'm contradicting myself. I told you don't do it with embouchure, but in terms of articulation and tone color, compared to playing alto, the embouchure needs to be slightly more adjusted. In particular, the lower lip, the amount of lower lip that you're going to curl in to your mouth needs to be a little less. And I'm going to demonstrate 2 ways. So the first time, I'm going to do the exactly same amount of lower lip curl into my mouth, so the exactly same embouchure from my alto playing. And then second time, I'm going to play with little less lower lip, which gives you much more quicker, sort of brighter tone quality that suits for soprano saxophone. This is with regular embouchure, same as alto. Now this time, I'm gonna do the less curved, less lower lip, and then hear the difference. I hope you could hear the difference in articulation, the quickness of articulation, also kind of a tonal projection opens up and it's easier to project the sound. Now it gets more evident if I do the chromatic scale with upper note, with regular embouchure from alto. Compare that to less lower lip. Hope you can hear the difference. So in general, if I wanted to have kind of a quicker attack, quicker articulation, or brighter and much more open tone quality, I use less lower lip. If I wanted to have a darker tone quality, warmth, I'm going to use more lower lip curled into it. That's just for the tone quality. For the tuning adjustment, we do it with simply the oral cavity correction. Alright, just like pitch bending. Now, in the warmer sections, yes, it would be nice to have more support from the lower lip, which mutes the sound. Sounds better than probably the less lower lip, which is much brighter. Now that I played both versions, I actually like both of them. So this is preference. This is how we could change the kind of a brightness and projection of tone quality on soprano saxophone. Now tip number 4, use air articulation for the upper register. Now obviously the upper register of soprano is much smaller, so it's very difficult to tongue clearly and articulate. So in order to sort of create a cleaner, sharp tone, in order to get the really clean articulations, I mix with air. So instead of just tonguing normally, for example, middle C, that's more stiffness to it in terms of tone quality. If I replace it with just air, it's cleaner, but speed is of course slower. So I tend to combine the regular tonguing with air to compensate the quality and clarity and speed. Now I'm gonna play from the last movement of History du Tango by Astor Piazzolla, and I'm gonna try to play the first time with just regular tonguing, but the second time with air attack on upper register, and so that you could hear the difference. So this time, regular tonguing. Obviously, it doesn't sound really good. Now, this time I'm gonna mix with air. Hopefully you could hear much clear attack, but it doesn't really change the effect of articulation. So if you combine with air, it becomes much more easier to control the upper register of soprano saxophone. Another section is like high G. this time I'm combining with regular tongue and air. Sometimes I do ha-ta-ta-ta, ha-ta-ta, ha-ta-ta. Ha-ta-ta. And that way I'll be able to articulate these upper register cleanly and quicker. So this is very useful to do it pretty much everything above octave C. If you replace that with air attack, it becomes much easier. Like this. Tip number 5. Use much smaller vibrato for soprano saxophone. As I said before, everything is going to be magnified. So, of course, the vibrato, which is the most sensitive skill of our saxophone playing, will be completely magnified. For soprano, we need to minimize the amplitude of vibrato, which makes it very difficult to control. But you should spend time and practice vibrato on soprano because it's completely different from alto saxophone. And I'm going to play for you the excerpt of Bolero by Maurice Ravel, a big soprano saxophone solo, and show you how tiny the vibrato can be for the soprano saxophone. Hopefully you hear the tiny amplitude of my vibrato on soprano. And with these small differences, you'll be able to control and master soprano playing and elevate your playing skill to the next level. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching until the very end, and I hope you enjoyed my video and hopefully it was helpful. See you next time.